Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 689. Today, Prabhjot Singh and I talk about AI, talk about using AI to improve the flow of work and the delivery of value. AI, however you define it, is in your future. You need to be ready. Mr. Singh is a serial entrepreneur who has started multiple for-profit, social enterprise, and nonprofit ventures. He serves as the president and CEO of Pyze, the world's largest enterprise to improve business operations through AI-driven process intelligence and analytics. He has over 20 years of experience in sales, marketing, and product management. He previously co-founded Pixatel Systems, a social enterprise that utilizes mobile computing to deploy apps and e-learning solutions to millions of users. Are you ready to improve your process with AI? It's time for the interview. Prabhjot Singh, welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Thanks, Tom. Pleasure to be here today.
Why don't we just dive right in? The whole idea of process intelligence is a word or a phrase that I'm not 100% sure that I think my listeners would understand. Some of them obviously will. Why don't you give us, so let's start with a little bit of a definition and then peel back in terms of how it affects or how we can use this as business owners and businesses to actually get more stuff that actually works and brings value.
Right. Yeah. So, there's putting kind of the buzzwords aside, right? In the world, if you go into any business, there's often a sense of how things get done, right? If I'm running a insurance company, I have processes for onboarding new customers. I've got processes for processing claims when there's an issue, right? If I'm running a grocery business, I've got processes around supply chain. I've got vendors that I have to manage. I've got distribution that I need to do. So in every business, there's critical processes that have to be addressed. And there's some processes that exist in every single business, things like customer service, for instance, right? And we typically have a sense of how things get done, or we have an idea of how things get done for those processes. And that idea is almost always wrong, right? So process intelligence is really all about helping people understand the overall processes that exist within their business, understand where the bottlenecks are in those processes, where work gets stuck in those processes, and then providing the ability to use data to actually fix those things.
Well, that makes a ton of sense. Most of the Software Process and Measurement Cast listeners are in the software side of the world. So they don't always have a full view of the value chain. So they're creating new features or enabling new features and don't see the entirety of the process. So we're talking pretty much end-to-end delivery of value with some of these processes that you're describing.
That's right. And really, typically when we engage with a customer, we're not looking at an end-to-end process. We're looking at a part of a process to start with, right? And then you kind of start somewhere and then you build out to get that end-to-end view, right? And even if it's, a particular feature that's being built, or a brand new system that's being deployed, people build software because they have some business objective, right? We build features because we want to do something faster. We want to do something cheaper. We want to do something better, right? There's some business goal associated with, 1,000 lines of code that someone writes to ship a feature, right? There's developers don't just get up. Yeah, developers don't just get up and let me just ship something today, right? There's requirements. You'd hope so, right? That there's there's some business case that led to that feature getting rolled out. Now, and whether we're talking about a feature, we're talking about, large transformation project where I'm taking some legacy system that's running on AS400 and moving it to the cloud, there's a lot of time, energy, money that gets spent into shipping code. And, oftentimes we'll just be happy that, hey, we shipped this, we shipped whatever it was that we wanted to ship, and now we move on to the next thing. And what we kind of lose the opportunity to do is take a look at what we actually shipped and evaluate how well this feature or this capability is helping us execute on the goal, right? So if my goal was to do something faster and I'm shipping 3 features, how are they helping the end do that task faster, right? And this is not in an abstract sense, right? It's if I've got, let's say, a loan origination system, I'm a bank, I process loans, and I have a goal of saying that I want to cut down loan processing from 40 days to 20 days, right? Which and a lot of banks are focused on this type of business goal, right? Especially as they get more and more competition from upstarts, right? Challenger Bank, all of that stuff, right? So there's time and energy that's spent at each step of that process, right? Documentation review, background checks, underwriting, funding, closeout, right, et cetera, et cetera. There's all these steps in a process. So if I'm shipping new features and my goal is to be able to sort of get from 40 days to 20 days to process that loan, how are these features actually helping me do that, right? So that's what process intelligence is being able to measure the end-to-end process flow and understand what are the different workflows, right? How often does something ping pong between underwriting and document review? Where does something get stuck, right? If it hits John's desk, does it sit there for 7 days just because John's a busy guy? Right. So kind of understanding not just sort of the code piece of it, but also the human piece of it, right? And combining those streams of data to understand, okay, how does work actually flow? And then taking a step back and saying, okay, well, I released this feature. Is it helping me do what I need to do? Are there opportunities to accelerate my goal even more, right? By actually looking at how that feature is utilized and how people are interacting with that application.
So how would all that work? I mean, would we, to be able to do something like that, would you hire an army of people to go out and collect data? Or is this, is what Pyze does a mechanical or automated process?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, right. So in olden days, right, you'd go and hire a consulting company, right, to come in and sort of say, hey, I've got this process, help me improve this process. And, what would they do? They would go and interview a bunch of people, be like, John, you work in underwriting. How long does it take you to do X, Y, Z? And, Karen, you work in this part of the process. And Geeta, you work in this part of the process, right? So they'd go and interview a few people. They'd try to kind of get a quantitative understanding of sort of the numbers of how long it takes someone to do something. Maybe they'd sit with a stopwatch. You've seen that in movies.
I'm sorry.
Right,
I actually did time in industrial engineering classes at one point.
Right. So, right. But it's actually not that much more sophisticated than that in terms of trying to understand, how long do people take to do specific tasks, right? So you get some quantitative data, right? You get some qualitative data by interviewing people. And then you then kind of together a report that says, hey, these are our recommendations of how you can improve your process. Right? That's kind of how it used to work in the old days. What Pyze does, right, is of course we have an AI-driven automated platform that you can hook up the different data sources to, right? So we can hook up applications that are actually used to do specific tasks, right? We've got a JavaScript plugin that can get down to the clickstream level, right? To see, okay, not only does it take 30 minutes to do this individual task, it takes 5 minutes to do the subtask, right? We can actually do that per user level, do that analysis. You can, integrate data from backend sources. We integrate pay band information, HR system data of employees, and you bring all of this data together. And then what we do is we track each and every single individual transaction that flows through the system, right? So in a loan processing case, it would be like the loan ID, right? That's acted on by every single person in that entire value chain to you, from when you start a loan to when you close a loan, right? It might be a claim ID for a claim system, or it might be, order ID for an order management system, right? So we look at the end-to-end flow of a particular transaction, and then we aggregate that for every single transaction that flows through that system, right? And now what you have is visibility into 100% of all transactions that flow through that system. And then we kind of say, okay, what are the different workflow variants, right? How many different ways does this work actually get done, right? And you'd be shocked how many times we see, it's not 4 ways that a loan gets processed. It's 4,000 ways, right? and we can sort of look at, okay, well, let's look at the top 10 workflows and let's look at how we can optimize those, right? In terms of, and you can optimize in our system based on, things like time on task, like how much time is being spent to process this particular transaction. You can optimize based on things like cost, right? What does it cost me to process a transaction? You can optimize based on elapsed time, right? Like how long that end-to-end process takes. And then you basically select the optimization scope, and then, our platform does the magic to sort of paint all the different workflows, and you can actually visualize it, and then you can hit play, and we'll actually play for you how those cases move through the different workflows and highlight where there's hotspots and where there's bottlenecks, and you can click on that visualization map and interact with that diagram and figure out, okay, well, it's slow at underwriting. Let's figure out why it's slow, right? Why?
I could also see the value in something like that after you've gone and done the next step, like make the change and help get it to that point. Find out whether or not people are actually doing it that way. I mean, let's face it. We've both probably been at this for a while. We know that you go make those changes, and whether you're an external consultant or internal in an organization, and lo and behold, as soon as you walk out the door or go down the hall to do something else, people are going, okay, let's go back to what we're doing. Would this be a mechanism to actually know whether or not stuff happened and value actually was delivered?
Absolutely. Yeah. We made a change. Did it make things better or worse?
Right.
Right.
That could happen, right?
Right. It could totally happen. And, and the beauty of this is you don't have to wait till the end goal, right? Sort of like usually when people do these, like even when they do big projects, they'll evaluate how we're doing at like some milestone in the process or at the end of the process. With a solution like Pyze, you can actually do it on a continuous basis, right? So as you roll out a feature, you can actually see what's the impact of that feature. Is it actually being used? And if it's being used, how well is it enabling people to do their job versus how they were doing it before, right? Because we've got that historical data, we've got the new set of data, and then based on what we're seeing, you can actually look at refining the backlog, right? In the path to deliver the value that you really want to deliver. So it in many ways sort of enables the business and IT to become partners, right? Versus sort of the business saying, hey, I need these things shipped. And then someone in IT goes and works on getting those things shipped. And then the business is like, all right, thanks.
Yeah, I've thrown it over the wall to you. It's your problem to deal with now. I think a lot of what we're describing, sort of jumping back to the whole idea of deciding what work to do up front, requires people to think through what the outcome will be in terms of value in more than just a fuzzy qualitative feeling, but a quantitative approach. Is that actually something that you see is in the ascendancy, or is that still something that people struggle with?
I think more and more people have to do this to be effective, right? It's like the world that we live in, you can't get by gut. Just in order for an organization to be competitive today, you've got to know what your goals are, right? Especially if you have to sort of, change business models, which today we have, look at the last 2 years, right? Like almost every single organization in the world has had to change how they do business, the types of services that they're offering to their customers, the products that they're rolling out, right? Like the world changed, and the people who couldn't manage by numbers actually didn't do so well, right? So you kind of have to manage by numbers if you're running any sort of efficient business, right? And what is important is to be able to see early warning signs of problems, right? So you can really mitigate risk by having a plan for early management of evolving hotspots, bottlenecks, right, within the business, and those hotspots could exist, because we rolled out a feature that's not helping us do what we need to do, or it's an external issue related to, let's say, supply chain, right? Try ordering a couch today, right? And see how long it takes you to get there, right? And it's like we got lots and lots of cargo ships in LA and Oakland, right, around where I live, and so like there's a very real supply chain crunch in the world, and that impacts every business. So whether it's an internal issue, external issue, code related issue, if you aren't monitoring what's happening with the applications, how they're being utilized, how they're enabling people to do work, you're only going to realize you have a problem when you actually have a problem, versus being able to sort of look at anomalies that are emerging that will impact the business, right? A week from now, a month from now, whenever, right? And then looking at those issues and then saying, okay, well, could we address this by, maybe it's releasing new features, maybe it's looking at automation capabilities, right? And then if automation is again one of these buzzwords today, but once you understand what issue you have, you can actually pick the right type of automation, right? Do I need RPA or intelligent automation, or do I need to implement a BPM platform? Yada, 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 right? But you've got to have an understanding of what the issue is and have, quantitative data that helps you then make the decision of, how do I fix it? And then be able to validate that you actually, fix things versus made them worse.
So do you see tools like Pyze as being monitoring systems that you build into organizations that run for long periods of time, or do you see this as, let's inject something into the scenario, make a fix, pull it back out? How does this work in real life?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we spend a lot of time with our customers focused on continuous improvement, right? This idea of you've got to continuously evolve what you're doing in the face of changing markets, in terms of changing dynamics of people, we're constantly hiring new people. We're constantly rolling out new capabilities. So if you look at this as, hey, we want to do this at a point in time, you really are only going to have a static analysis looking backwards, right? And in today's world, that analysis becomes dated almost as soon as you do it, right? Because things are moving so fast. So, our goal with customers is really to sort of help them this journey of first map their entire enterprise, right? So we'll typically to the question you started off with, right? We'll start by looking at one piece of their business, right? Which might be, let's say it's customer onboarding, or it's the RFP process, right? For a healthcare company. And then we'll then connect that to the next part of that, right? Because once you get an RFP, you execute on that RFP. Let's say you win that RFP. Well, the next step is now you got to onboard that customer, right? And then once you onboard that customer, now you got to service that customer, and then you keep going downstream from there, right? So what we'll do is we'll start with one piece of this end-to-end business, right, which is a individual process, and that process might span multiple systems, right? Might span Salesforce and Pega and OutSystems and ServiceNow and right all the different platforms, and we provide kind of an understanding of what's happening across those different platforms for that particular process. But then you connect the dots between this process and the next process, right? So what we're doing is kind of creating a digital map of the business itself, right? And that's where we have to get to, because digital is the business, right? Like that's as we move forward, everything is being transacted more and more on the web and on mobile, and probably tomorrow in virtual reality rooms, or wherever the hell it's going to be. But that's kind of where we're heading, and then in order to be agile today, you've got to have an understanding of what's the weakest link, right, in these business processes, and within each process, what's the weakest link in each part of that process, right? And once you understand what those issues are, you can fix them, but then you've got to keep monitoring them so that you are able to understand other issues that might emerge.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Organizations that engage in this vision of gathering data, having a way of mapping, and then monitoring, what do they get out of it? I mean, is this something that you sell as a huge payback? How do organizations think about the reason to do it, other than, hey, let's get more value out of delivering to our customer, those sorts of things, make sure we do the right things? But are there other paybacks that they should be thinking about?
Oh, absolutely. And look, being kind of a analytics company, right? Like we're all about numbers, and we eat our own dog, right? Like we understand our processes for onboarding new customers, and we understand exactly who's using what aspects of our product, and how often and for how long, and and we translate that, not just sort of just data that they're getting, right? Like it has to be translated into business value that we're delivering. So, on average, we'll deliver 300 to 500% return on investment in the first 12 months, right? Of any customer coming on board, and then that typically increases, right, to kind of 800% in year 2, and as we move forward, as we kind of have a better understanding of other systems, right? And what they get out of it, right, is understanding kind of what the first step is understanding what you have, right? And then being able to measure your processes, because as the age old saying goes, if you can measure it, you can improve it, right? And if you can't measure it, well, then good luck.
It
right.
becomes that gut feel thing that you described earlier.
Yeah, right. So the first step is really understanding and not looking at the Visio map that someone drew that's outdated, right? And maybe we have a Visio map from 10 years ago from when we started, or even last year, whatever it is. It's looking at that dynamic process map of what the process actually is, right? The living, breathing process itself, understanding what are the, what are the different workflows that exist within it, where you have inefficiencies, and and then looking at those inefficiencies and then identifying how do you actually fix those, right? And we're not, Pyze is not a magic bullet that's going to fix all your issues. We're gonna shine a light on the problem. All right, we've got an AI engine that kind of analyzes the data. It looks at anomalies. It looks at hotspots. It looks at emerging issues that we can send in real time to Slack and Microsoft Teams and alert the right people. But then it's really, okay, how do you use this data to make decisions, right? That's what we're enabling, is helping people make smart decisions and better decisions using data, right? Sort of look at, okay, I've got a bottleneck here, and analyzing the bottleneck to see, okay, well, are people doing the same task 20 times, every hour, and that's creating this bottleneck? If that's the case, then maybe we need to look at some RPA solutions, right, to kind of address that issue. Or, I've got a bottleneck here, but people in the Seattle office are doing this much slower than the Cleveland office, for instance, right? So what are best practices? Of course, right? Of course. Right. So let's take those best practices from Cleveland and apply them to Seattle, and right. Or do senior people do things much faster than junior people because, we've got a bad UX and senior people just understand that it's a bad, and they figured it out. Right. So once you have the data and you have an understanding, you can look at, how do we improve the efficiency? How do we improve the productivity of our employees? Which is going to make, who wants to be unproductive at work and, deal with a poor UX or a process where you got to send something back to the person who sent it to you, and you're going back, you're ping-ponging back and forth. And that happens so many times, right, within processes.
I think we could probably all recognize that. And none of us, or at least 99.999, 6 nines, probably don't look forward to doing stuff like that. Prabhjot Singh, this has been marvelous. If you woke up tomorrow morning, somebody handed you whatever your caffeinated beverage of choice is and a magic wand and said, what are 2 pieces of the business process world that you would want to change? What would those 2 things be, and why?
So it'd be a double shot espresso. That's right. That's how I start my day. And in terms of I just think there isn't enough awareness out there in that you can get this visibility in an automated fashion, right? So we work with so many and we love working with, teams that focus on process improvement, teams that focus on, lean, right? That focus on industrial engineering within organizations. And they're all spending like half their time collecting and munging data, right? To make it actionable. So I think that's the big thing that, we're trying to do, is really promote this idea of use the data, right? Like
that's where the value is.
That's where the value is, and that's what the job is, right? Like the act of collecting the data and cleaning the data and connecting the dots between system A and system B and system C is a painful task for right? Anyone that tells you a different is lying. I think that certainly would be one thing, is communicating out to people that, look, in today's world there is the ability to sort of have this automated ability to continuously monitor processes, so you don't have to do this work manually, right? So I think that's certainly one thing. And then, the second piece that I would really sort of hope for is people really look at, as we move forward, how can automation help make your processes more efficient, right? And like I said, automation is a big buzzword these days. Everyone talks about, we need automation, but what you have to do is pick the right automation solution for the right problem. Otherwise, you're going to wind up implementing, let's say you implement RPA, and I've actually worked with a number of organizations that kind of did this, where they said, okay, hey, we're going to implement RPA and it's going to help us do this process much, much faster. And they spent 6-9 months implementing it. And then 3 months later, they spent the next 6 months ripping it out because it was the wrong automation solution for the problem that they had, right? And you can only really figure out what the right automation solution is if you really understand the problem, right? So you've got to be able to understand, at the process level, what the different workflows are, at the workflow level, what the different tasks are that people are doing, and at the task level, understand, the steps that are involved in those tasks, right? So that ability to kind of zoom in at different levels of granularity to get down to what, how work actually gets done, right? That sort of individual unit of work that if you then start bubbling it up, you get that end-to-end process that might span a complex business architecture that, spans 7 or 8 different systems, right? Like, you've got to be able to zoom in and out to sort of understand, what the problems are at the workflow level, so you can improve orchestration and, eliminate workflows that are just bad, all the way down to the task level, so you can improve productivity so that people are able to do things better and are happier doing the job that they're doing, right?
That's important. I'm sorry. How can people continue the conversation? How can they find you and connect with you and have this conversation?
Yeah, so you can reach me on Twitter, PSingSF, or just hop on to Pyze.com, Pyze.com, and fill out a request to have a conversation. So would love to continue the conversation.
Super. This has been marvelous. Very, very useful and important information. As at the end here, I open up the platform for you to promote anything that you'd like. So the platform is all yours.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity to come in and talk about process intelligence and the work we're doing at Pyze. We're working with some of the largest enterprises in the world, right? The U.S. Air Force, the post office, private organizations like Colliers International. So we're seeing a lot of kind of demand in these capabilities across the board, and I think I'm very excited about sort of the impact that we're able to have with organizations. So I'm keen to connect with your listeners and see if there's opportunities for us to work with them potentially.
Super. Prabhjot Singh, thank you for spending time with the Software Process and MeasurementCast listeners.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate the opportunity.
In Reread Saturday News, Week 6 of our reread of Agile Conversations by Douglas Squirrel and Jeffrey Frederick continues on Chapter 4, The Fear Conversation. We discussed 2 of the 3 major concepts in Chapter 4 last week, but did not consider the fear conversation and more specifically the fear chart. My experiment of the week. I am going to double down and commit to creating a fear chart this week. Whether an opportunity for a fair conversation presents itself, we shall see. Next week, we continue an essay refining how we're using flow metrics in 2022 to manage, flow. That really shouldn't surprise you. Rather than micromanaging tasks or kidding ourselves with relative sizing techniques. We also have a visit from Jeremy Berrio and his QA Corner. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?